If you are an addict, then whether you realize it or not, you have superpowers. I'm serious. In this crazy world, in this crazy consumer culture, people who have suffered from debilitating addictions know something, or at least have the potential to know something, that if cultivated and harnessed is just like having superpowers. And I'm going to explain that to you right now. But real quick, if you're new here, then welcome to the Smiles for Miles community. I'm Brian, a previously trauma ICU RN turned full-time heroin and meth addict, currently serving out the rest of my 3 to 10 year prison sentence on house arrest. This channel is a way for me to just reach out and share with you what I'm discovering about how to find meaning and balance. And I'm applying those lessons that I'm learning to my own life here for you on the channel in real time. I want to start by just acknowledging that we are an addicted people. We live in a society that is positively driven by addiction. Our economy thrives on getting as many people addicted to as many things as possible. And as adherents to this paradigm of boundless consumerism, we by and large structure our lives around trying to wring every last drop of pleasure out of the material world that we possibly can. And no matter how comfy, cozy we are in our day-to-day existence, with every new luxury that appears or every new option that becomes available, we end up defining ourselves in relation to that, to whether or not our circumstance affords access to that. Given our nature as human beings, with our predisposition towards gathering and accumulating not only material things, but also our appetite for information and being in the know, addiction is, as Dr. Gabor Mate puts it, really the most human thing that there is. And this habitat that we all live in basically functions as a factory for creating addictive attachments. We are consumed by what we consume. I would venture a guess that if most people took an honest assessment of their day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month lives, they would discover that they are at least somewhat addicted to something. And what I'm calling addiction here is any behavior that one regularly engages in that provides some sense of temporary satisfaction or relief, but that in the long run is the source of dissatisfaction or suffering in their lives, and yet the behavior is repeated anyway. I think you'd be hard-pressed to find anyone who doesn't have something in their life that meets that qualification. Now you might be thinking, Brian, you're just talking about bad habits. That's not addiction. Bad habits are just mild addictions. Addiction is a spectrum. On one end, you have bad habits, and on the other end, you have life-deranging issues. But they all function on the same continuum. When you compulsively are looking at your phone to check your emails or see how many likes you have, or you're always going for the second piece of pizza when you're already full, or when you're opening up your laptop to Pornhub for the 3rd time today, those things are admittedly not as extreme. They are much more subtle and acceptable. They don't raise the alarm in quite the same way as reaching for the needle or the crack pipe does. But what you want when you do those things, the fix that you are trying to achieve, is precisely the same thing as the hardcore addict. You're engaging in exactly the same process. Both the normal people and us hardcore addicts and everyone in between are, when we indulge, looking for pacification, distraction, a moment of reprieve from the deeper unsatisfactoriness of our lives. What other reason could there possibly be for doing the things that I've just mentioned, when we well know that it will ultimately solve nothing and leave us more derailed, maybe slightly or maybe more significantly depending on the problem, off the tracks of arriving somewhere that we really want to be. The only real difference between them and us, is that we also did all of those things of yours, and we recognize that this just isn't going to cut it. Something inside of us recognized the emptiness in it. Now, whether or not we recognized that at the time is a different story, of course, but what we knew is that we were hungry for something more. And so we took this society at its word and said, well, if the ultimate goal is to just pacify ourselves into oblivion, then there has to be a more exciting and potent way of achieving that. And so we, as the true pioneers of this dogma of consume at all costs, took it to the max. And we developed full-blown sex addictions, gambling addictions, alcoholism, addictions to meth, whatever. We just lost our patience for the milder things and thought, well, if this is what is supposed to be working, it's not working for me at this level. And, I want the full experience. I want, you only live once. Go big or go home. Okay, so now I'm here and I've been sober for 2.5 years. What happened was I ventured to that precipice and I discovered that that stuff actually is way more exciting than all this regular stuff. I have to say that if given the choice between the drugs and your, doom scrolling all day, I would take the drugs. But what I realized is that both of those things are ultimately the same empty pursuit. And now I can't pick either. Consuming for the sake of consuming, whether it's fancy cars or heroin, is just something that I can no longer tolerate as my primary pursuit of happiness. We hardcore addicts, if we don't destroy ourselves in the process of that journey, come back with a superpower, with a sixth sense, which is the absolute understanding in our bones that all of those things that have been meticulously designed to capture our attention and shape our lives are all bullshit. We discover that there is ultimately nothing to be found there besides pain and misery. If you have suffered from a real serious addiction, you are gifted the opportunity to recognize it as maybe the biggest blessing of your life. You can wind up with real gratitude for it, because the truth is that the tinier little habit addictions are much more insidious. They're much more acceptable, much more encouraged, and because of that, they have a much greater potential for going under the radar and getting missed for a much longer period of time, and then you wind up at the end of your life realizing that you wasted most of it. The gift of hardcore addiction is that it offers you the red pill, because you recognize that the blue pill just doesn't work. Now, I'm not gonna lie, taking the red pill is much harder work, but you get to dodge bullets and fly, so I think it's worth it. When you decide to embark on the journey of lifting yourself out of the haze of your addictions, and consequently the haze of modernity, the cool thing is that you realize that there's nothing inherently wrong necessarily with chilling in the Matrix. You can still enjoy the indulgences. Worldly pleasures are not off limits to you. Not only are they not off limits to you, you enjoy them even more, because you have a better relationship with them because you recognize that they are not the actual source of your fulfillment. They just get moderated down to the appropriate level in your field of awareness. It's only when those things are not kept in check and when they are allowed to take front and center stage in your life, that's when they are virtually guaranteed to lead you down a road of malcontent, dissatisfaction, and ultimately a sense of existential meaninglessness. So what can you do about it? How can you begin the journey of taking the red pill? Well, if you are in a situation where you are currently really addicted to dangerous and overwhelming things like I was, then you have to stop that, okay? You have to start there. You have to gain some distance between you and the object of your overwhelming desire. You have to start looking at your situation honestly, being honest with yourself, being honest with the people around you, and getting the help that you need. That's very important. I know us addicts are so opposed to getting help, especially when we're in the midst of that shit. So you gotta take a step, and you have to want to. You know, that has to be your primary focus. When you start looking around, you might find that 12-step based stuff is kind of the primary thing on offer. If you're kind of allergic to that stuff, just realize that it's not the only way out, but it's a good way to start if you need to take that path. If you were like me and you're just super averse to that stuff, you can, read Russell Brand's book called Recovery. He does a really good take on the 12 steps and kind of, unpacks it in a way that makes it much more palatable and approachable. Get the audiobook of him reading it. It's super entertaining, and I recommend it. But regardless of what you find or how you do it, the key thing is to get honest with yourself and just get past the part where you are super attached. Get that distance. That's super important, because without that distance, you don't have the clarity to really get started. For the rest of you who aren't dealing with something that is, immediately super threatening or has you in some sort of chemical dependence, my advice is basically the same. You have to step away from the kryptonite, because it's blinding you from and draining you of your powers. I'm talking about developing a practice of renunciation as a way to step out of the river so that you can stop flowing aimlessly with the currents of desire. A guy called Adam Curtis says, "We have been taught that freedom is the freedom to pursue our petty, trivial desires. Real freedom is freedom from petty, trivial desires." Renunciation is the opposite of desire. When you are all tangled up in your world of desires, when you have no distance from that kryptonite, it may sound like starting to focus on renunciation instead of desire is like moving from a life of abundance to one of destitution. But in reality, it, as Bhikkhu Bodhi puts it, is to pass from gross entangling pleasures to an exalted happiness and peace, from a condition of servitude to one of self-mastery. So if you're interested in moving from a life of servitude to one of, peace and more self-mastery, the first thing that I would recommend you do, and I've been saying this a lot lately, but it's because I think it's so important, is you need to start by developing the capacity to keep promises to yourself. You have to be able to know that if you make a promise to yourself, you're going to keep it. Okay, I made a video on that, and it's called, If You Can Do This One Thing, Then You Could Do Anything. But I'm going to make another video on it next week that's a little bit more focused, because I'm finding it to be such a crucial first step. Another thing you need to start doing is limiting your choices, okay? Once you can trust yourself, then start making promises to yourself to limit your choices. I have a video on limiting choices, which is called Your Freedom is Imprisoning You. I'll put it at the end of this video or whatever. All of this stuff that I'm talking about is just based on what I am applying to my own life and what is working. After a lifetime of not, being engaged at all and just allowing myself to get swept away by the world's desires to the most extreme level, I've come back and regrouped, and I'm starting from scratch, and this is what is working for me. Okay, I just want to share it. If you're new here, we do the song of the week. We got a lot of music lovers in this little YouTube community here, and if you want to share your music, put it in the comments and I'll listen to it, and we'll maybe get it up here as the song of the week, and you can share it with the rest of us. We love that. The song of the week this week is called Arrow Through Me by Wings. This is something that old Kyle Kirchable, what's his screen name? Deshaun Jackson or something. He is always commenting, and he showed me this song, and I love it, and it's something I hadn't heard before. So check out Arrow Through Me by Wings. Also, if you're struggling and you just need some support, come back to this channel, hang out with us. There's a lot of good people down in the comments, startup conversations. We're here for you. This whole thing is just to create some support for each other as we move through this life of ours. All right, we're not doing it alone. You're not alone. Hang out. Get to know us. It's a good time. All right, I'll see you guys on the next video next week. Thanks for joining.